Hi, everybody, and welcome to our very first Table Talk Edition network stream on our brand new YouTube channel. Trying out some new tech. If something isn't working, please tell us. Hope the sound is balanced. Sorry for being a tiny bit late, but let's get started. As as always, Blaze Reason.
Table Talk Edition network
Oh,
stream
wait,
on our brand.
sorry, I forgot to mute that YouTube video. That should be. Kyle isn't there. Nice that you can be at least in the chat. But yeah, as I was saying, Blaze Reason, creator of Ishanek on World Shapers, and of course, Eternal GM.
How's everyone doing?
And for the very first time, the creator of Redshifted Games, or how is it called exactly? Introduce yourself.
So I'm Ian. I make the game Redshifted. It's a sci-fi tabletop game set in a dystopian galaxy. It's been in development for about 3 years now, but I'm actively looking for beta testers. You can find me on Twitter at Redshifted Game, and I'm very excited to be on the show.
Great, great to have you here. Today's topic is we continue the whole character concept. We already had social characters, we had intelligence-based characters. Today, we think with our muscles. Time for strength-based characters. As you can see, we are all here peak physique specimens.
Wouldn't that be nice?
I mean, let's be honest. There are tabletop nerds that are very fit, but the stereotypes exist for a reason.
Oh boy.
Hey, it's good to laugh about oneself, right? So, how about we start by talking about typical strength-based characters from fictions, be it video games, be it comics, be it movies, and such.
So something I want to get into right now is just to sort of prime us for this conversation is why people play strength-based characters, kind of the expectations that people have. And I think the big one that you see in all types of games, whether it's tabletop games, whether it's an RPG like Fallout or even Dark Souls, I think there's an expectation that if your character has high strength, that you're going to do a lot of melee damage. And I think that this is a big reason why people pick these characters, because there's just that expectation, and it gets reinforced in again a huge variety of games of all different types and all different mediums. That you pick the strong character, you're going to be able to get into a fight, walk up to the enemy, and hit them very, very hard. And it's certainly a viable play style. It's valuable to a team. It's viable in solo play. But again, it's reinforced often enough that it's an expectation. So I think that's the biggest reason, not the only reason, but perhaps the biggest one why people tend to pick these characters.
Yes, definitely. But how about we start with some classical strength-based characters from fiction? Eternal GM, you probably have some good ideas, right?
I mean, you got like people like Conan, which breaks the dumb barbarian, all the way to Captain America, which are really good emphasis on strength builds. That, I guess video game wise more recently for Conan, but Captain America being in the movies, they're pretty prominent characters, but I think they really fit the idea. It's like, man, they may not actually have anything else on the table they can do, but if it's one arm pull down a helicopter, the guy can do it. They got the best
Uh.
carrying capacity. Like, there's a lot of reasons, but I feel like beyond combat, you get a lot of utility things that people don't necessarily think about. Like, video games highlight the carrying capacity, but I don't know many role-playing games that have that extra carrying capacity for extra strength kind of direct translation. Like, that's not all of them that I played. I know that I don't think Shadowrun had that. I think you just had a set inventory.
Huh.
Actually, I guess most of which I have played do have the extra carry capacity, but as you said, there are also quite a lot of utility things, moving the rocks out of the way or catching a falling object and such, or even the
Holding
more
the falling-
social aspects of intimidating somebody just because you are a hulking mass of muscles, and you know the goon that you captures maybe doesn't want to mess with that. But yeah, Ian, do you have some classical strength-based characters from fiction?
Well, I would say look no further than the Incredible Hulk. I think the Hulk might be the ultimate strength-based character in fiction.
That was the
That's,
one I
that's
was.
his entire thing.
Yeah, that was the one that I was going to mention. Like, he is the strength-based character in his purest form. I fully agree.
Hulk smash! And boy, does he smash!
Oh, indeed. But yeah, I guess then, can I quickly think of somebody? Like, Conan the Barbarian would have been my second pick. I guess the strength-based character is as, at least at the first glance, simple archetype, and most minds pivot towards the same examples. Be Conan, who, to be fair, was surprisingly cunning. That's a stereotype that he was the Onga Bonga type of barbarian, which is the Hulk is more the Onga Bonga type barbarian, right? But he doesn't even use a club or anything.
Excluding Bruce Banner side of Hulk character, it legitimately is just purely the strength character. There's nothing else there, and it really shadows other characters in it.
Mm-hmm.
The Conan, yeah, it does emphasize like sneakiness, dexterity, and a bit of wisdom too. It's not a pure, but if people think of barbarian, they think of strength.
Yes,
and Conan's the famous one.
Definitely. The thing, which kind of brings us a bit to different concepts of the strength character, which kind of emphasize the more athletic build that combines dexterity and strength. They're usually not represented as that muscly, more like a balanced physique. But versus the pure hulking mass that doesn't usually fight with any finesse, like the Hulk or the classical barbarian, right? Do any of you have any other types of classical strength-based character ideas or concepts?
Gosh, I really should be coming up with some. I'm drawing a blank right now. I really shouldn't be.
To be fair, the strength-based character is, from all of the character types we discussed so far, that we're probably going to discuss, the most straightforward. So it's not.
Right.
To be fair, I also kind of have difficulties thinking about another strength-based characters. So it's not really that unsurprising that we're just a blank after the whole. Okay, which one is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, you're strong and congratulations, you've done your job.
It's one I wouldn't give because normally you don't apply this alone to Superman, but Superman, like super strength, is literally one of the powers. But there's so much more there. It's not really emphasized on, hey, this is a strength character. Like, I would go if I had to pull Goro. Goro was not dexterous, he was not intelligent, but he was by far strong and had 4 arms. But yeah,
I mean, that's gotta help, right?
Yeah, the next archetype, the strong man with 4 arms, like my chop, Gorok. The depths of strength-based characters we're discovering. Maybe one thing.
Blaze,
Yes.
you keep that game balance in check now.
But I guess one way we could explore strength-based characters is by seeing how they may interact with other character roles, more hybrid, so that we
Go.
can expand the scope a bit. The one thing I first thought of was the athlete slash gladiator slash stuntman. The one who makes a show out of his display of strength, who knows how to work the crowd. Who, maybe if we go a bit in the direction of the paladin, who also inspires the basically charisma-based strength character.
You know, when you mentioned the, there's the gladiator type of character who would probably make use of a combination of strength and dexterity to an extent. It reminds me of another sort of character archetype that is very interesting, where they also do that, but socially they're quite the opposite, and that is your assassin, your melee assassin, who also needs to be strong and dexterous, just so they can hit really hard, so they can just stab that knife through the enemy and just go right to their heart and take them out in one hit. And I would argue that requires some strength to do, and that in a lot of role-playing games, the need for strength shouldn't be underestimated, because, like I mentioned, melee damage so often does scale with strength. And that's an important role within a party. It can be very nice, when the rest of your party is grouped up, fighting someone face to face, to have someone go in the back line and just start taking out high-value targets.
Yeah, the combat focused strength type character, right? Usually, they are also very tough, being able to take hits, be it because they can carry heavy armor, or they're just that beefy that swords bounce off their flesh.
Yeah. And we get into tanks with that, which is another very important team archetype, having someone in the front line who can absorb that damage, so the rest of your very squishy characters, your casters and your archers, snipers, or whatever, don't get completely wrecked.
Yes, right. The tank. That's we should have thought of that earlier. I think it's also a pretty classic strength-based character, especially in video games and MMORPGs, especially. Any other concepts? The one. I'll give you a second before I carry the whole conversation.
Oh, you're good.
No, I can't really think of just straight pure strength. Like when he brought up the assassin one, it kind of made me realize what's giving me the problem is that in core system, we took what is the combination of strength and dex and made that power. So where like Jet Li and Yip Man don't have strength, they have power and dexterity. That's actually a different application of muscle bulk compared to densification of muscle, where strength is the amount of bulk, where it is still dense, but the muscle fibers aren't as thin and twisted together where you would have in dense muscle compared to strength. So not even looking at power, like I said, that's been a problem in a couple of the podcast character styles where I'm thinking about it in my system and completely blanking to things that generically would also count as strength. Like the world's greatest martial artist of all time, any of them, any legendary martial art movie, these would be counted as strength in like a 6-stat system. So, yeah. I would say add them to the list. I mean, that's a lot of characters immediately. But I'm a huge martial artist fan, so.
Yeah. There, of course, is the idea of the unarmed combatant, more Eastern style martial artists, as you mentioned, but maybe also like Western wrestlers, or maybe the sumo ringer, right?
I mean, Muhammad Ali.
Oh yeah, right. The boxer, of course, the boxer. The footwork, the speed, and just devastating blows.
You also got the big collegiate wrestling style of thing that would be associated with strength. So, like I said, I was blanking myself to a lot that I would put as power, but generically, it's associated with strength.
I have to say, I have not seen, and maybe I'm just looking in the wrong places, but I have not seen a lot of tabletop games that that provide like like a wrestler type of character as like a character class. And I'd like to see more of that. It's a fun archetype to
Yes,
just get in
definitely.
there and kind of use your tactics and technical knowledge to figure out like how to restrain your foes for the team, um, pulling enemies off your allies, and just figuring out how to um, defeat your enemies through positioning. I think is a really fun way to play.
Yes, definitely. That's also where we entered the terrain of the tactical strength-based characters. One thing I have to think of is the one Sherlock Holmes scenes that get memes populate or whatever, where he analyzes how exactly is he going to combo this fighter into oblivion.
Oh, that was such a good scene in that movie. That was really well done.
Yes, definitely.
It was like showed him planning it out, and then you cut back to just reality, and they're standing there,
Dr.
and then he
Pop-
executes the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was so great.
When I first watched it, I was like, is he actually going to do it? Or are they going to be anticlimactic? And he just, with the first move, it doesn't work and he gets knocked to the ground.
Hey, did the Fight Club scene ring out the same answer that we all said at that moment? Where the hell did that come from? It's like, Jesus. Like, yeah, he was beating people up, but all of a sudden that was, all right, you're hospitalized. That's not just I beat you up. This is you're done for months.
Oops.
Yeah. Psychological recovery, 9 months. And I'm like, Jesus.
So, yeah. Okay, what was the next? I should have written down the questions. I kind of rushed the preparation.
Normally, this where we would cover the part where it's either like, hey, this is how other systems or our system handles it. It's okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about moving towards the generalized how strength-based characters are depicted in different tabletop RPGs, but I wasn't sure, like, was this the next step? Did I forget something? Sorry, normally Kyle makes sure that we stay in line, right?
Kyle, no!
I'm sure he'll be back soon. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the reason why he's not here, but he might not be regularly here as usual for a few, for like a month or two. We hope to see him soon again. I mean, it's not that he's sick. Like, that sounded like he's sick. He's not sick, okay?
He died, guys. Sorry.
He just wrote in the chat. Like, he's the only chat message we have so far. Even beyond the grave, he supports us.
He's probably staring at me having like taken a spot, just like. I want to get my throne back.
Anyway, back to how are strength-based characters usually depicted in tabletop RPGs.
Right.
You, Eternal GM, mentioned the carry capacity, which
Carrying capacity, like the reason I say like even 5e doesn't really do it is like to be honest, I've used the variant rules because of the players that when I first got into 5e from 3.5, I was like, all right, internet's all about these home rules with this. How do y'all feel about carrying capacity? I don't really care. I don't think coins should weigh money. That's my opinion. Let's go. And they said, no, let's use the variant one or one, everything like that. So you basically go, okay, and you forget it exists. And that's a lot of systems I've played. I'm not saying they don't have rules, but when have you played it to where it was actually something that was built into the game? People really cared about it. That's not been my experience. So the strength-based characters were never picked to have, I can carry more. It was, dude, I want to be able to shove the boulder down the hill to flank the enemy when y'all run them down this valley. I want to be able to hold the stones up that are falling as y'all run past and the caves collapsing. That's what strength-based characters during gameplay have always accomplished for me. That and the biggest of weapons. That to me has been my experience in tabletop games with them, as well as role-playing. Like, I mean, you have weapons called, I think, what is it, Gargantuan in Dark Souls or
Colossal.
Elden Ring? I forget.
Colossal
Colossal.
weapons.
Oh, what is the term? Colossal weapons.
Yes.
Yeah, they're huge. They're unrealistic. Like they make Cloud's Buster sword look like a butter knife. Yeah, that's strength.
Oh, I do love me my Dark Souls and Elden Ring strength-based characters. That's always my favorite build. Just get the biggest, bluntest object you can find and smash the skulls in. One-shotting every single normal enemy. Two-shotting anything that's like slightly elite. And the bosses just bam. Who needs, keep your tiny little daggers. I want to do some damage.
So
But,
you're that double giant hammer guy, aren't you?
Actually, in Dark Souls 3, or generally in Dark Souls, my favorite weapon is just the club, the big club. Going full onga bonga on their asses.
The Elden Ring, you can get a pair of them.
Yeah. Big Paid Stories asks a question. Something about putting strength and constitution as one stat together. I've seen that done in some systems. For example, the one created by Shad University. I never played it, but I've taken a look and seen him talk about it. He simplified the stats to 3 things, and strength is that combination of constitution and health. And yeah, it's definitely intuitive. The more stronger you are, the more muscles you probably have, the more hits you can take. And when you think about the classical tank, you usually think about a muscle-bound warrior, and less about. I mean, there's the idea of the dodge tank, but even the concept of the dodge tank is usually the idea of him. You think of him as less durable as a classical tank, be it
I'm not sure that if that is a true tank. It's more. It's interesting that the idea of a dodge tank does kind of fill the same role in the sense that enemies will hit it and it will survive. But in the case of the dodge tank, it's really about literally not getting hit and just trolling the enemy as hard as you can. Oh, I'm over here, and just getting them really, really freaking mad. Probably.
I think the only legitimate dodge tank I have played in a video game, in the sense that he was actually tanking and getting the attention of others, was the Drunken Master in World of Warcraft. I'm not sure if there are probably others, right? But
I was about to say monks in Diablo, certainly Diablo 3, played a bit like that, where you just emphasize dodge. I believe. I think it was what monks
There
did.
was
Anyway.
like built-in techniques. It's not really you were dodging. It's just that like when a character would hit your character, you had a percentage chance of an auto response happening.
Right,
So it was
yeah, that's kind of what I meant there.
But yeah, it had that gameplay. You're correct about that. It just
active
kind
dodging.
of disappointing in application.
Yeah, active dodging does certainly make for more interesting gameplay, I think. But it also just depends on the type of the game you're going for too. Sometimes you don't want that complexity, so you just make it a percent chance.
Yeah.
But back to the question, if we want to simplify your system, then yes, I think it makes tons of sense to combine Constitution and Strength into one. But I think if you keep them split, you can make interesting character concepts that you would otherwise not be able to do. Something like the a fighter who can hit really hard but just burns out very quickly. Somebody that I've got to finish this in 12 seconds, otherwise I'm out of steam.
Dude,
Or-
that's a famous anime thing. Like,
Yeah.
just I was just watching something last night, collection of fight scenes, and the guy was literally like, my power is tied to my endurance. If I don't finish this fast enough, I'm going to lose. So it was like right in line with that.
Or yes, you want to say something?
I was gonna let you finish because my thing is going on speaking on that. Yes, we can always combine stats, but I'm seem to be the only person that I went from 6 to 12, and I've got very valid reasons and have created different types of equipment and things around the utility of these extra stats. I can't combine them. Like, for me, that person asking, that to me is a cardinal sin of game design that is due to people seeing the OGL system of 6 stats and 18 skills and believing that's just how this kind of game design works. So they either do something very similar or try and go, I'm gonna do less. But rarely do you see someone do more. And the few examples I tend to see are either random, like, we're going to add as much as we can, or they go, no, we're literally going to have every possible thing, and forget that game. That took 4 hours just to read their character sheet. They have like over 1,000 skills. It's ridiculous, but
Calm
props
down
to
now.
that.
Dexterity in your right hand, dexterity in your left hand. They can be different. Maybe you had an accident with your left hand, okay? And it doesn't work as well
No,
anymore.
the guy has balance while in the air, balance while on the feet, balance on single foot, and balance on rope. No, there's like 18 different crafting skills, all to do with blacksmithing. It's like, I have 3. You have weapons, armor, and accessories. That's it. That's not even my D20 system, which is all crafting. It's just crafting. People that made 1,000 skills, like, that's too much.
I hate to be that guy. But what was the question again?
The question was
Why
about
not
us.
combine constitution and strength?
Yes.
Oh, right.
You want to say something
So
about
that's
that?
what I brought
Or
up. I'm
Right.
going the opposite.
Honestly, I don't have a huge amount to add from what's already been said. I mean, the idea of combining those stats, like you guys mentioned, does make a lot of sense. It can absolutely work. It can feel intuitive. When you're trying to play a really, really quick game, that probably is the way to do it. Just have a sort of physical stat like that.
yes, the question always the design goal, right? The
Right.
fewer stats and more stats both have strengths and weaknesses. If you want to make a simple game, then reducing the amount of stats is usually the right choice. If you want an intricate game, a crunchy game, then it doesn't hurt to increase your choices. And there's always the middle path, right? My system, for example, has 7 stats. It used to have in its very early stages 9, but then I just combined the 3 stats into will.
I would just kind of offer this to any game designer is that, yeah, there are a tremendous number of possible systems that can work. You can have few stats, you can have a lot of stats. Just have a plan. Kind of know have an idea for what the feel of your game should be. Because you never just want to do this stuff like just because you can. You want to do it for a reason. And that reason should always be to support the type of feel or experience you want to create in your game.
Fully agree with that.
Yep.
But let's go back to how different tabletop RPGs implement strength-based characters.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all very familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, and I think a lot of what we said is
We don't
pretty
say
in
that
line
name. Yeah, we call it the
I'm
Dragon
sorry.
Game, as it shall not be mentioned.
I-
Yeah,
sorry.
You can say
Oh gosh,
Dutch.
they're coming for me. Oh god.
Yeah, you can say it, but just so you get the inside joke, we usually call it the dragon game. It's
like,
it's kind of.
You actually scared me for a second there. I thought we were gonna get demonetized or
Do
something.
you know how many
No.
D&D YouTube channels exist? We're not going to get
A lot.
demonetized just by mentioning it.
I'm still waking up. That's my excuse.
Well, I'll tell y'all this. I will send a message if I ever get messed with for what I did compared to D&D. If so, now we need to be careful. But I burnt my book collection in a video I made.
Wow.
If I'm not getting screwed with, I think we're all fine.
Yeah. We it's kind of all of the core speakers on the stream tend to dislike D&D or the Dragon game. Sorry. Now you got me saying the real name. But
Watsy and Hasbro.
Yeah.
Not D&D. I grew up from 2nd edition with them.
All right, I'll give you that, but especially when we're talking about the 5th edition, what's your opinion? Yeah, you can be honest, don't worry. If you like it, we're not going to mock you or anything.
I mean, it's an interesting topic because clearly it's a functional system. It works, people play it. I didn't say it was the most functional system or the best one, but that's a matter of opinion anyway.
No.
No, it just happens to be one of the most popular and best known. I think it wouldn't do us any favors to ignore it in this discussion.
Yes.
Because it has served as a baseline for many other games. Look at Pathfinder. Pathfinder developed out of 3.5. I mean,
yes, but on your point, I will point out Pathfinder can't even get its 3.5 variant of Pathfinder fans to majority switch to Pathfinder 2e because they dislike 5e that much. They'd rather stick with what worked and was. I mean, think about that. When you look at the percentages of Pathfinder fans, it's like an 80-20 for 1st edition compared to 2nd edition.
what's
So
interesting is
something's
that
wrong.
what's interesting is that I've
The
had
delay
a
is
look
screwing.
at both editions, and I actually like both of them. So it's just interesting how that popularity can work out sometimes. But sorry to get us so off topic. Let me try this again.
But yeah, let's talk about how the Dragon game handles strength-based characters.
Sure.
We, of course, have the classical barbarian class,
Right.
which is like the
you have-
strength-based character.
Right. And then you have fighters, which tend to do it a bit more tactically. They'll add more heavy armor and things like that, and they tend to be pretty good tanks, as well.
And we have the paladin, who is strength / charisma based.
Yeah. The whole your holy warrior archetype, just run out and I don't know. Yell out the name of your god and smite some evildoer. That's kind of how I see it.
But
And then, and then finally, you can't forget the most important part of playing a paladin in the party, which is having a terrible, terrible rivalry with your rogue.
Oh boy. But let's look at the mechanical side.
Yes.
One thing I find interesting, the way the Dragon game makes strength-based characters tanky is by just giving the classes that are traditionally strength-based characters bigger hit die instead of strength actually leading to them having more health.
Right. Now, to be fair, what this means is that it means that your character is going to be reliably tough, no matter how much you put into strength. Which can have its uses.
But
it's an interesting way to do things.
But one problem with the Dragon game is that strength is just one of the worst stats. Probably the second worst just after intelligence, which is, unless you're a wizard or artificer, basically useless. which I hate. The thing is, usually Dex gives you more. It gives you a boost to your armor
Yes.
class while giving you
Dex
the
is
same
nice.
damage boost with weapons, and you just have to take the finesse weapons instead.
Yeah.
Constitution.
Dex.
Hmm?
Sorry, I just want to say Dex has always felt like a slightly overloaded stat in that game,
hmm
but that's just my opinion.
And of course, you have to take Constitution. Even if you're a wizard, you have to
Yes.
take Constitution.
Yes, you do. I mean, unless you're one of those insane people who literally min maxes and has like no constitution, but then you're probably not doing a strength build in that case.
Yeah, that's
You're
one.
also insane. I don't
Yeah, the stats are horribly balanced in the Dragon game. That's I think we can all agree on that.
So, talk to me again though about kind of what you meant by strength not being a very good stat. I mean, are there things you expect it to do or you think it should be doing that it's not doing?
First of all, usually the utility side of strength-based characters is minimal. You have maybe a proficiency in the athletics check, and that's kind of
Yeah,
it. And I guess you
that's
can
terrible.
break into stuff, move stuff, jump good. But that's nothing that one spell of the wizard doesn't solve without him having to roll, right? Then you
Fair.
have the problem that effectively casters are tougher than classical strength-based characters because of their spells. Just cast one shield and you
Oh
outperform
yeah, using those kinds of spells.
the
Yeah,
AC of the fighter or the barbarian uh, or the paladin. And when it comes to damage, sorry, weapons just cannot compete at all with spells. There's only
that
one
is
thing that
true.
even remotely is viable, being Great Weapon Master, or how was it called? The one with the ranged weapons that basically gives you the same, and that just barely keeps up. While you're having to risk yourself far more for and that's also a thing. You don't have that fantasy of the strong Unga Bunga fighter who just goes in and messes everything up with one mighty smash.
Yeah, and I would say that there could be that fantasy with some retuning, but as you mentioned, the other elephant in the room there that kind of keeps them down and can make them feel weak is the spellcasting system because it overshadows them,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think that might be I could be wrong, but I think that might be the bigger issue in some ways is that
I
and
think
I agree when you can't have your special moment of like hey in this moment I'm the huge strong guy and I'm doing, all this work or I'm accomplishing this because I'm strong, whether I'm saving the team from this boulder that's rolling at us or whatever it is. Yeah, if you can't be special in that regard, you're right. It doesn't feel that great when a bunch of other people can just do your job with the different thing. It's like, what about my special moment? Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
not to disparage anyone. I do genuinely sympathize with these strength based characters and their players there, and that was a good thing to bring up there because I momentarily forgotten that I haven't played that particular game in a little bit, but you're right that sort of disparity between strength based characters and then a lot of casters is a bit problematic for making those characters feel special.
Yeah. I heard that Pathfinder solves this problem by making frontline fighters the best single target damage dealers. Um, I've never played
That's fair.
Pathfinder, either second edition or first edition, but I've seen a lot of videos about it, and
Yeah.
I looked a bit into it. So, if have either of you played Pathfinder second edition?
Second edition, no. I do have two first edition campaigns going with that are run by a couple of my friends. And we've been doing those for several years now. Um, so I can say that at least in first edition, this does seem to be the case. I have a very cheeky rogue build that can apply sneak attack to on enemies that he's just disarmed, even
Mhm.
when sneak attack wouldn't normally apply. So they can be staring at him, and because he's just disarmed them and they're caught, the feat is literally called caught off guard, I think. Um, and so he takes his huge whip and he just starts hitting them for sneak attack damage for like so many d6s at a range of something like 30 feet. It's so funny to me. It's not very funny to the enemies, but hey, they're all NPCs that can suck it. But yeah, so if we're talking about single target damage, there are many ways for martial characters to achieve that, and it does feel very satisfying when you pull it off.
Any other games that you can think of and how they handle strength-based characters?
Sure. Um, so my game Redshifted, um, which I admit is a 6 stat D20 based system. um, how I dealt with the thing is I actually did look at spellcasting in the Dragon game, and the game's very similar to it. And I did see it as problematic. I thought this is completely overshadowing martial characters. What are we doing? And I scrapped the whole darn thing and came up with new systems. I mean, and it makes sense too because my game is sci-fi rather than fantasy. So I came up with something else, um, which is there are two systems. There's electronic techniques for your tech-based characters, and then I also do have a bit of a fantasy thing. We do have psionic powers, um, and the how psionics work in a sci-fi game and how I make them feel like they fit is its own topic. But these two sets of, I guess, special abilities, they end up feeling very different from spells um, in some of these other fantasy games, where they're not so overbearing. They're kind of like you always have them. You can even use them more reliably than spells in those games. Um, like you don't run out of spell slots in those games. But what ends up happening is they're smaller and they're more consistent, which admittedly is kind of like how fighting works. You have your certain number of actions per round. You run up and hit the enemy. And so by sort of putting the systems more in line with each other, I think it balances the game experience so much better. And then what ends up happening is that both groups are happy. The martial characters get to feel special because they're still strong and they can run up and hit someone really hard, or manhandle them and throw them across the room, or restrain someone to stop them from getting at their allies. And then your casters, or those types of characters, get the consistency where they're still able to, cast regularly. They're not going to run out over the course of the day, and they can focus more on the tactics of how they're going to use their abilities to benefit the team and achieve whatever the party's goal is. So it ends up working out pretty well for everyone.
Yeah, you kind of skip to the next steps, talking about our own systems. I
Sorry
was
about
actually going to go there soon, so we have a system. Yeah, nah, these talks are
Second
far. Yes, yeah.
or 10-second edition, I've actually loved how, since you brought up a science fi or cyberpunk like tech level game, I've always loved how you can have the augmentations of biomechanics or cybernetics, and it adds just a real unique flair of strength styled concepts to even
it does.
a mage or a dex character. Like, I'm now a mage hacker who can jump up on top of this building. That was just really cool. So it's using the
Where'd it go?
utility of equipment and character modifications to accomplish it. And that was one thing we didn't mention is like, yeah, some other games actually use in-game modifications for creating that. And that was a really cool, different way of handling it. Like, yeah, they have strength builds, but it's really cool to just be able to go, I have cybernetic legs, so I can run fast, jump high, and kick you really hard.
Yeah.
Like I'm strength or athletic build, but I'm not.
I guess the augmentation thing also opens up a whole new range of possibilities, including flavor, which is really interesting. If we look at Cyberpunk, for example, the idea of you can only add so many of these augmentations. It's because you can only take so much, or
Mhm.
there goes
And
your brain.
in Shadowrun, it's a exchange of, call it, the more cybernetics you add, the less of your soul is there, so less
Yes.
magical capability. So in some games,
That's
it's
an
a literal
interesting idea.
trade-off, not just a character death if you go too far. It's an exchange.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of handling that to keep the game balanced, so that you can't just do everything. That's very creative.
Yeah,
But did you want to
that's often seen in more cyberpunk type settings that cybernetics have downsides. It's part of all that dystopian flavor, even the cool
Right.
technological stuff. If you take too much, you turn into a murder machine who will just lost any sort of empathy.
Oops.
Squishy
negatives to
human.
charisma checks because you smell bad because you're dripping oil and burning liquids? No.
Skill issue.
Yeah.
Reminds me of that Futurama episodes where Hermes wants to be better for his wife and starts to replace parts of his bodies and becomes more and more
No.
robotic.
Oh no.
Uh,
I haven't seen this, but oh no.
do you mind spoilers or?
Oh, I'm fine. I don't care.
And while Dr. Zoidberg collects all his parts and makes him into like a fake friend meat puppet, and eventually Hermes goes so far that he replaces last organic part, his brain, and
Oh no. Oh god.
and
Don't do
Zoidberg
it.
just puts his brain into his meat puppet, and there you have the original Hermes again. While he accidentally took the brain of a psychotic robot, and now they had to fight. Speaking of, if you lose all your humanity, you becomes a murderous robot.
Hey, at least you get all the benefits of that strength built in, right?
Oh. But yeah, But yeah, since Ian already talked about Redshift, Eternal GM, how do you handle strength-based characters in your system?
Honestly, by spending a heck of a lot of time figuring out how to deal with the martial caster imbalance. Like I've mentioned in previous episodes, how, like, for instance, just a real quick side note on magic, you have to roll to hit with it. It all is treated as wild magic. We have a training level system, which you have to train individual spells. And their damage output depends on single or group attack and how well you strategize their usage. So they're the glass cannons in our system. There is no Constitution mage build. But with our marshals don't roll initiative. They go by their modifier, unless you have a matching modifier. They just go first. They are the combat experts. They have more reactions they can do per turn. They have more movement speed. They move first. And by adding things in like concussive damage and the way we handle armor, you don't just blast a huge armor guy down. You have to actually either use a weapon that's doing concussive damage to knock them out, or actually break their armor down with our durability system. These actually make the marshals in our game so freaking capable. Like I have two players, one's playing a combatant, which is our fighter, and a rogue, and they're never playing 5e again. We're running Curse of Strahd in my system right now.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like they haven't gone back. It's actually been the biggest shock to me because I went, I'm creating all this. Let's try this. God, I'm gonna have to tweak. Wait, it's working fine. The is everything okay? Are y'all
Nice.
lying?" And it's been like that. We've added more, not necessarily taken stuff away. Like, we do have some stuff that could improve marshals, but we got to the point where I went, hold up, we don't need to reverse the marshal caster imbalance. Let's slow down. Because, like, no. We were looking at realistic martial artist stuff, and it's like, do not get within 5 feet of a trained martial artist in any anime or fantasy game because it will destroy you. Well, if we run it like that, now we just made marshals into casters. They're now the dominating force in the game, and everyone's like, "Oh, casters are under accredited now." So that was the big focus, and really, beyond adding in weapon features like the training system I mentioned, as you get higher up with different weapons, you can unlock different features. Like with a a trident, you can stab it in, it does piercing, but if you have an extra attack you can now twist it and remove it out, change damage type, and apply bleeding. So with these extra things, it's adding stuff that marshals can do in combat that they never had a chance to do beyond run up to you, hit, wait for a turn. Now, if that opponent moves, they might have an ability that immediately allows them to counter and move them into it. So, yeah, you tried to move, but I'm still mid-attack technically through the turns. Well, I didn't want to do this and do all of it offhand, so I turned and basically... You haven't been told. I've been doing martial arts for over 20 years, so a lot of my personal experience and MMA actual practice and application I've done gets applied into our game knowledge. My partner in the game system is a massive expert on medieval weapons, oriental weapons, just weapons in general. The guy actually can fight with razor sharp weapons and not hit himself. So
That's
we're putting a lot.
awesome to have that kind of background, because that must do so much for your game to just be able to take realism and put it in there. Because the thing about realism is that almost always it intuitively makes sense if you understand it. And that can do tremendous things for game design. As in your case, between what you and your partner know about different types of fighting, that's incredible. What you've been able to do for martial characters just through that knowledge inspiring you. That's great. I'd like to learn your system now. This sounds like a lot of fun.
Honestly, after the chat, I'll spend a little time giving you everything so that you can come check out the channel, see some of us talking about it, join the Discord, and actually
Absolutely
have one of those personal conversations.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
I mean, we could maybe play it once in
Look,
the...
I've got 38 subscribers. We need the people.
I actually posted a link. It should... it did not quite work. Whatever. But yeah, your name is in the description, and the YouTube ID is in there. That should... I guess I have to rework how it actually... Sorry, we kind of had to rush description a bit, but I'll fix that. So to make sure that it's just one click away to get it to your YouTube channel. And,
How to make that song play in my head.
So, what was... I wanted to say something. What was it? String based? Oh yeah, right.
Your system handle. We win. The audience is
that too, but first I wanted to mention, because Ian, you said you want to try it out. Maybe we could run it for the GM days off one day. For those who don't know, it's a new project we're working on with the Tabletop Technicians Network, where all of us indie tabletop RPG designers meet up and run each other's games for each other, so that we get to experience the player experience for our systems for once. The first game will be next Saturday, 18 Central European time. It will be a Borderlands reskin of D&D 5th edition.
Nice.
I'll be GMing that, actually. And
I'll be honest. The sort of the wacky feel of Borderlands does sound kind of perfect for this.
but yeah, we could play it eventually for the GM's day off.
That would be awesome. Like right now, I'm at least trying to get 7 classes done, 3 subs each, and I have to refigure stuff out because one person that had everything on his computer kind of just went bye
Ooh.
and cut us off. And so I'm like, that's $200 in artwork I paid for. I'm rewriting combat and how to play. Like, it's a pretty big situation. So give me a couple
Wow.
few months to have a professional PDF up and made before we get to that point. But
I'm so
the
sorry
game
that
still is
happened to
100%.
Yeah, we
We
have.
trust the wrong people. We're
Uh,
really helpful and kind. This person was going to be homeless if I didn't take a 7-hour car ride to Louisiana from Texas to go pick him up. So I'm that kind of person. It just doesn't come my way very often.
Okay, what I wanted to add, the GM's day is off. Sorry, just kind of got very serious. Anyway, GM's day off is planned to be every second month. So until we get to your game, you have plenty of time to finalizing that PDF to share with everybody. But yeah, one of the reasons why it's every second week is because each GM has to learn a whole system. For example, the current system that I have to learn has almost 1,000 pages. To be fair, I can skip skim
Wow.
above like a lot of it since it's a risking of 5e. But still, so that our GMs have plenty of time to get to know the systems that are supposed to run. That's why it
Suddenly I
will
don't
be.
feel so bad about Redshifted.
Everyone's gonna love my system from everything I'm hearing. Art fucking how to play is less than 50 pages. That took so much effort.
No
Yes,
kidding.
thank you.
Good for you. That's impressive.
Like I've been like this for 20 years. 20 years, and I finally got to a point where it's all functioning, it's all working,
I'm really
and
happy for you.
I'm in talks with people bigger than me.
Congratulations on that. So for my system, which is, if you count the core rules, 60, but 60 pages.
I was actually about to ask about your system if you got a moment.
Yes.
Which sure hope we do because we're on the stream.
Yeah, we still have an hour. I think we're
Yes.
going through the points too quickly, so please ask. Fill the time.
Yeah. Blaze, I wanted to ask you about your design goals for World Shapers, and in terms of strength and what you were trying to accomplish there. Because it's a heck of a fun system, but I'd like to learn more about the design process of kind of mentally how you got there in the game design with regards to these strength characters and what you wanted them to achieve.
Well, the design for Ishanek on World Shapers, much was written by D&D 5th edition does this badly. How can I improve that? One of the things was balancing the stats so that every stat is actually useful. One of the main ways strength is useful is your inventory size. I have to think about Eternal, what you mentioned at the start of the stream, that not many use that, and in most systems you kind of just ignore it. That's something I wanted to fix. I simplified the inventory system, so the weight system is abstract. It's like a sword has a weight of 2, a two-handed sword has a weight of 3, and so on. And you don't track the weight of everything. You have a bag where you have all those stuff that are not important, like personal trinkets, money, crafting materials, and so that you don't really have to think about that.
Sorry. Sorry. If I remember correctly, you had an equipment, just an item called equipment, and that's kind of where you packaged everything up into. That's a good way of handling it. I like that.
equipment is sort of the spellcasting focus, but for every class. It's an abstraction. It also contains any sort of equipment that a character of with those skills would have. If you have lockpicking, you will have
Right.
lockpicks in there. If you're engineering, you will have engineering tools in equipment. It's an abstraction.
Right. And
But
it,
what?
it works very well. It's a great way to just kind of cut through the crap, I guess.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to make sure. Yes.
I actually got a good question for your system because I've heard a lot about how it's the Lego build of picking different. Forgive me if I'm using the wrong word, but
Great.
feats or abilities. So, like, what are an example of 5 or 3 to 5 of those that you would give to a standard strength build that would excel in going, this is what a strength fighter is in my system? Like, what are some of those? Because you told me the magical ones. I've heard the rogue ones, the scientific ones.
Well, the question is, what is a standard strength-based character in my system? Because my system, because of that Lego style building, has an insane flexibility. If you think about the wrestler, for example, you would probably want to take dirty fighting so that you have to grab action with 1 action point instead of 2, so that you can grab somebody and start pummeling him, or maybe even comboing him and grabbing, tripping the enemy on the same turn. And I guess then you have 1 action point left. I guess you can use those action points to actually get to your target. So in such case, if you really want to lean into the whole grabbing, tripping, shoving, blinding the enemy, then you really need the dirty. Well, you don't need. They are technically other ways, but the dirty fighter talent is very valuable for that. Every way of handling a weapon has a talent. I guess that would be the most default, right? You have a two-handed weapon. You take the two-handed, two-handed attacker, or I can't believe I forgot the exact name. That's why, because whenever I look for the talent, I just type in two-handed and it shows up. I think two-handed attacker. Which allows you to reroll the damage dice of the weapon, or one-handed precision, which gives you 2+ to hit if you attack with a one-handed weapon without wielding a shield. Reactive shield, if you have a shield, you get 1 extra reaction point. Multi-wielding, which gives you an additional attack for each weapon you're wielding. There are ways to get more than 2 arms in my system, so technically you could have like 6 weapons, and with multi-wielding you will get 6 attacks. But beyond the first one, they will only deal half damage. And for each additional attack you get this way, the precision of all attacks is reduced by -1. So basically, if you really have the 6-armed character with 6 swords, that would be -6 to hit for all attacks. So it's balanced around that.
Right?
Actually,
so
one of...
basically the...
Basically, what?
So basically, the talents in your system for the strength build are just more or less adding to the normal things that we've pretty much been discussing about strength. So you're literally able to piece together not just being a strength character, but how I'm a strong character instead of picking like a
definitely
line.
There are you could go, for example, the Unga Bunga way. The sub-archetype, the Brute, is probably the best option for that, but you could also go Warrior, which and then just pick talents, which gives you damage boost, like bolstered weapon, or hard hitting, and stuff like that. And then it's really just you run in and hit the enemy's heart. Maybe one thing I should mention: if you're fighting with weapons, the default. My system has so-called paths, which help you define the core mechanic of your character. And for weapon-based characters, the default path is Path of Attack. When you level up, you get the option to increase the damage of your attack you get for the attack action, or you get an additional attack which deals half damage. So you can, again, the options. Am I the character who just runs in and does one mighty smash against one target, maybe one-shotting them? Or am I more finesse, multiple attacks to handle multiple enemies, or putting maneuvers of each attack. So somebody with multiple attacks is usually better at crowd control. Then Path of Attack also gives you one extra lesser talent, so you can pick that weapon specific talent you want. Then there
Sorry.
Oh,
You finish?
I was just saying, okay.
Then maybe you want to be a bit more strategic, finesse-wise. For example, if you take the duelist who specializes in maneuver abilities. Abilities are basically the spells of my systems, but they're not just spells. They can also be sword techniques, physical maneuvers, and or tech stuff. It's like there are over 800 abilities, so you almost can find something for anything. And the duelist, for example, is focused on maneuver abilities. So maybe you have like 3 attacks combined with a trip attack with the first one, so you have advantage on the other attacks. And then maybe poison strike to poison the enemy while he's on the ground. And physical strike if you just want to hit very, very hard. There are really a ton of options. Of course, there's control. The wrestler, when you mentioned the wrestler, I have a sub-archetype who is called the wrestler, who has the ability when you hit somebody with a weapon attack, you can make a grab attack automatically. You can combine it with the maneuver grab attack to, if you have multiple attacks where you can really grab 2 enemies. Eventually, the wrestler actually gets the ability to, when he has 2 enemies grab, to just smash them into each other and knock them out.
A real classic.
Yeah. That's a lot of fun. There are just so many ways. There's also, so if you go tactics, maybe the more support, the leader sub-archetype, for example, to boost your allies while still being in the thick of things. I mean, currently there are over 120 sub-archetypes, and I actually working on 10 new ones and a vehicle update. So where you could maybe be a strength-based character in the sense that you have a mech who is the strength-based character that you're piloting, right?
Why not?
But back to the very basic was the carry capacity. I mean, what I like about my system is if you don't, every stat gives you something else that's, even if you don't necessarily need it for your character. And if you completely ignore that stats, you're going to feel that. I saw that with the strength-based character. One of my players made a halfling druid, or it was a gnome druid. Anyway, he had the minimum strength value in there. And he was like, I'm not going to need strength. You transform into strong characters. And suddenly he realized that he could just carry 1 ration with him. Because he had so little carry capacity, and the other people had to carry his stuff. So, the inventory is also very important if you are an ability item user or ability consumable user. You can carry stimulants and such. For the alchemist, for example, strength is surprisingly important, since then you can take more of the ability consumables as you crafted with you, right? Strength is also important in the sense heavy armor is very heavy. It has a weight of 6, which is the highest weight an item can have in my system.
Oh, really? Okay.
If you go through all the basic items you need with a heavy armor, you have 6 for the armor, 3 for equipment, 3 for the bag. You're at 12, and then you probably need at least 1 weapon. Let's go with probably 2. You need. It's usually wise to have a backup range weapon or backup melee weapon. So if you go with 2-handed, that's another 6, and with that you're already at a weight of that's 12, 18, and you get twice your stat modifier. At level 1, the highest strength that you can have is 13, so 26. So you only have, if you maxed out strength, that's 8 weight units left. That's not that much. If you have average strength of 20, you only have 2 weight slots. Wait, that's food for 2 days that you can carry around, and nothing else.
Nope, get a pack
So,
mule.
and then of course there are the skills. There are three strength skills, which after Constitution and Will is actually the lowest amount, but I did want to diversify what strengths can give you. There is athletics, which is all that jumping, climbing, grappling, playing sports and such, and then there's raw force, which is the whole just pushing the boulder, breaking through the door, and stuff like that. And there's menace, the social interaction way of using strength. Just the barbarian standing in front of the captured goon and just looking down at him, staring him at him, or whatever. So, yeah.
I've got to say, the idea of using strength as a stat for intimidation is definitely an interesting idea that you put into play there.
I actually borrowed that idea from Open Legends, another free tabletop RPG, which isn't as 100% free as my systems, because you want creatures, you've got to buy the books and so on.
Well,
But
gotta make money somehow, right?
I actually copied even the name Menace from their skill. I'm not going to hide the fact that I borrowed a lot of ideas from a lot of games, be it tabletop RPGs, video games. For example, the stat system of my weapons was inspired by Dark Souls. Every weapon in my systems needs 2 stats.
I wondered where that came from, because it's something I've not seen in a tabletop game before, with like just that big of a variety of ability scaling on weapons. But like now that you say that, it makes perfect sense. I'm like, oh yeah, huh?
Dark Souls has many weapons that needs 2 stats to wield, right? The classic quality build, which mixes dexterity with strength. Actually, when I was still playing D&D, kind of trying to fix it with a bit of homebrew, I made a feat that allows you to wield a weapon with dexterity and strength. And it's
Yeah, that's a good thing to have if you can balance it.
what. First of all, that system allows to have a wide variety of weapons that lean into different types of strength-based characters, right?
Mhm.
And it also makes it a bit more realistic. I always found it really annoying that you wield a sword with strength, even though dexterity is far more important. So in my system's primary stat is dexterity's secondary stat is strength. Strength still helps you, yeah, but it's not as important. But
Yeah.
for classical strength-based characters, you have the blunt weapon, on the large blunt weapon, which can be anything from a club, a hammer, or mace. Then, of course, the axe, which has a bit of dexterity in it, while blunt weapons are just strength constitution. That's really the full Onga Bonga build. But there are also range options. The mini ballista, for example, or the minigun. Both weapons, which are so huge, no real human can wield them. You need extreme strength to even just hold them and take the knockback. Longbows also are primary stats strength, because you need to train for years to actually be able to draw a longbow.
I think people really underestimate that. Just that historical bit there is how much strength you really need to do that.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
stereotype is the archer's dex type character, and if you wield a short bow, you don't need that much strength. Sorry about that. I'm a bit sick.
He died.
And you have that in almost every game. You wield bows with dexterity, even longbows. And I'm like, that's not at all how bows works. As somebody who actually shot a bow, it was funny. Back when I was in school, I took a friend to the shooting range, and he was really proud of his physique. He did a lot of muscle training, and he shot the bow, and he barely could hold it because he was using muscle groups that he did not train.
Oh, dude. Man, you're not even kidding with that. Like, from some of this like research I've done, longbows actually support the spine of the guys doing this. That was like over 100-pound pull or damn near. These
Oh wow.
their spines are tweaking from the arcing of the bow, and we knew which hand everyone was forced to do because their spines all tweaked the same direction. And so it's interesting when you look at the skeletons of warriors who trained their whole life with different weapons, because you go, wow, I never would have thought that would have affected their body that way. Like even a two-handed sword, you see some interesting stuff with this shoulder blades and shoulders. Like, what was one of them? Cartilage. Cartilage goes out. Like a lot of double-wielded sword guys in back in the day talked about shoulder pain. They were rubbing their cartilage apart on their shoulder jointings in between their shoulder blades, swinging massive swords like that.
Yikes.
And so that's why it's like, see those guys using giant cloud strife like swords? Stop. You are going to destroy your back.
Yeah.
Yeah, people going dexterity is just, it's not good. You need dex to be able to aim it, but if you can't be strong enough to actually wield it, it's not usable. The two-stat thing's beautiful.
Yeah, but Ishinekon War Sherpas doesn't necessarily focus that much on realism, especially with the weapons.
I mean,
The fact that a longbow can keep up with an assault rifle, yeah, that's not realistic. But what if you want to play as Hawkeye or Green Arrow in a superhero setting?
there you go.
Then you're not using a longbow. You were using a composite bow, which is half or less the strength to use.
I know that. They
School.
You refer to Hawkeye after saying longbow. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just meant bows. Like I also have a short bow in my system. I have crossbows. I have. But yeah, that's one thing that I disliked about the Dragon game. That some weapons were just better. You wanted to play as a classical knife wielding rogue. Well, short swords and rapiers are just better. If you want to play efficiently, sorry. Like, okay, you can throw the dagger, but then you don't have a dagger. And the Dragon's game doesn't let you keep drawing weapons. So, yeah. And in my systems, all weapons are balanced, and they have different strengths and weaknesses, but you never feel like you're nerfing yourself because you're taking the weapon that you think, yes, I want my character to wield this weapon because it fits with my character concept.
What I love about the stat system you've done in your weapons is that all characters, no matter what stat they've chosen to match, can find something that will scale well with them if the goal is to min-max. And I know like min-maxing, can be a contentious topic sometimes, but still, the fact that your game, which you mentioned is primarily meant to have a lot of flavor in it, even then can still appeal to these min-max players. That's quite an accomplishment to be able to do both.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I think I implemented, for example, daggers are dexterity and intelligence weapons. But what if you want to play a beefy guy who has like a butcher's knife or something, and you don't want to really invest that much into dexterity and intelligence? Then there are ways to work around that. For example, you could take the unorthodox weapon choice, I think it was the name, which gives you a boost to your weapon's damage and hit if you're wielding a weapon that's not your primary stats. So you can actually wield a weapon that's not made for you in quotation marks.
Is that a talent?
Well, yes, that's a lesser talent. It gives.
I gotta take that.
Then there's also the options to override stats of weapons. Raw Force Adept, for example, allows you to overwrite a stat to strength, even if it's already strength, though you can have a double strength weapon. Same with Quick Fingers Adept, just with dexterity. That's, by the way, the only way to get a double stat, like a weapon that wields the same stats for both, with Quick Fingers Adepts or Raw Force. I still wanted to keep dexterity and strength as the main weapon stats. So most weapons have dexterity or strength. Not all of them, but but there's also, if you take the tier 1 dancer feature, you can replace one of the sets with charisma. Tier 1 battle engineer, intelligence, tier 1 predator, or a ranger. You can replace it with instincts, or the unarmed fighting style. The archetype feature of the unarmed archetype is all about you can switch in constitution, will, intelligence, instinct, or charisma to really represent that mind and body fighting style. To maybe make a dexterity, instinct, unarmed strike or something like that. Sorry, I just I realized I
you're
was
good.
in such a passion rant. Where am I? Is this planet Earth?
Your game has a lot going for it. I don't blame you for talking about it. It's great to hear about this stuff. Plus, it brings more people into the game. Come play the game, guys.
Yeah. I also one thing I had to thought about. I'm working currently on a big vehicle upgrade and update for the systems, where I also want to implement vehicles, which really put the idea of a vehicle very wide. Among other things, a wheelchair, and the thing about the wheelchair, it will have a trait that makes your the basic movement of the wheelchair is very low, but you can add half your strength bonus to the movement of the wheelchair. So if you're really, really buff, but not that quick on your feet as a strength-based character, you could actually be faster with the wheelchair. Just the image of like just pushing the wheels and just the superhuman speed, like drifting with the wheelchair.
Let's also not
mind.
forget. Just want to say real quick. Let's not forget about the hidden passive of the wheelchair, which is to make every grog nerd in a 10-mile radius lose their mind.
Sorry, Jam, what did you want
Yeah.
to say?
You broke my mind. I didn't hear wheelchair. I heard I'm working on a big vehicle upgrade. I got a wheel share. Like people were gonna share the wheel, and I was like, oh, whoa.
To be
Wait,
fair, they
what's
can do
going
that
on?
too.
Sorry, I guess
Yeah, but I was just like,
enunciate the end, right? Wheelchair.
it worked too perfectly because you said wheel shared and went off on a strength-based character, and I'm like, well, he's winning. It's like,
But that actually reminds me of how isn't there a trait or something for vehicles where they can have multiple pilots, and doing so will give them more advantages? I mean,
yes, especially in the new system, there will be modules that you can give your vehicles, which can be used by a co-pilot. There's, for example, the turret, where you can just put any sort of weapon on the vehicle. Of course, the classic idea is something with ranged stats, right? But you could also put a sword, and you have like the mech with built-in sword in there, and the person in the turret can make weapons attacks with that, and even use their own abilities on the weapon. There is the captain seat, where you can make an analysis, menace, presence, or improvisation skill check, and if you succeed, you can allow somebody else to make a second turn, a co-pilot a second turn right after you. Or the one I really like is the empowered platform, where it's great for ability users. While you're in the powered platform, you can use abilities, and they're upcasted by twice the tier of the vehicle.
wow.
So I have the image of like maybe the one with shock gauntlets that's on a platform which just fuels him with electricity, and he just shoots energy bolts that are twice as strong as normal because he's fueled by the vehicle. Yeah, and of course there's a more support role, the engineer room, where you can heal the vehicle, buff it, allow it to deal more damage and such things. But how about you two talk about more about your system, and I'll take the chance to be away for a few seconds. I will still be able to hear you, but just talk about your Redshift. Like you didn't, I think, say
Yeah.
that much about strength-based characters. What kind of weapons do they work? What kind of
Yeah.
features / talents does your system have, and so on?
Yeah. He's getting away. He's getting away.
change topic. No.
Mods are asleep.
still
Post
here,
ponies.
guys.
Yeah, what you got for your system? Because I got some stuff I'll say about weapons and what we
Sure.
did kind of unique that uh kind of limits the, like how he was saying there are not better weapons. Well, my system has better weapons. You just can't pick them from the beginning. It's a stat thing. But
Yeah.
what do
Yeah.
you do with them?
Well, I gotta say, I'll tell you about what I do with them, but all this talking has gotten me thinking about maybe I should start reworking some things to add in some more of these features because there were some great things brought up here. Between both of your systems and also just the conversation
Ask
we
me
had. You're cutting out
ask
real
me
bad.
later about my reaction and ooh, ask me later about my reaction and trigger system. It actually is the number one reason that a 2-hour 5e battle is like 30 minutes or less in our system.
Nice. That by itself is
So
amazing.
I'm share that gold. Like I'm about improving the total mechanics and innovation across the tabletop community. I
I can
think I
only get
found
behind
a
that.
golden ticket to better combat, so I want to
That's
share it.
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So my system, redshifted, it is admittedly a D20 system, very, very familiar to players of the Dragon game. And there's a reason for that, and the reason is when I started developing that, Pathfinder and D&D were the only games I'd really played. Um, it wasn't until more recently that I started branching out and exploring and finding just the sheer variety of indie games out there. So as a starting point, I didn't admittedly have a huge variety of background in tabletop games. So I worked with what I had, and my goal um, was to take a lot of sort of issues or just things I didn't like about the feel of some of the games I had played and figure out how to improve them, how to make the experience just more fun, more interactive for players, give them more options so they never felt like they were stuck and unable to play. And at the same time, I wanted to create an experience that was more challenging. It might be a bit of a stretch to say Dark Souls level of challenging, but I would say that Redshifted is a more challenging game than D&D. Not necessarily to play, but to keep your character alive in. Redshifted gives a lot of player agency, but it also demands that you use that agency, or your character might get wrecked. You need to work with your team. You got to use your brain, use your creativity. Talk it out amongst your party. You know how you're gonna handle the combat encounter you just got into. That's how you're gonna make it through instead of just running in like a maniac. Um, and with those things in mind, I guess we have a bit of background now to talk about combat, and I guess if we're gonna focus on strength based things. Um, so you've got a strength stat, and it affects your um, by it affects most of your attack rolls and your damage rolls. So your attack roll to hit the enemy and your damage roll to see how much damage you do if you hit them. Um, there is another aspect though that I want to get into with Redshifted that is not seen in some of the other games I've played, and that's how I handle damage reduction. So damage reduction is built in to all types of armor, and you can get some on shields as well. Um, and that can certainly impact what your damage is going to be. Um, and so what this means is that, um, say if you're concerned about getting into a melee fight where a lot of damage dealt might be, I don't know, bludgeoning or slashing or something like that, then what you can do is you can choose your armor if you've got the money for it. You can select your armor and shield and whatnot to try and optimize for dealing with that. Um, and that's, I think, a great way to add that agency where you can be rewarded for planning ahead, a bit like that in fights. And then, so if you're trying to defend yourself from, Conan the Barbarian, okay, we're about to get into a fight. We know these guys are very, very physical, that we're going to be fighting. Let's be prepared for that. If you could actually be prepared for that, then, you've got your Kevlar or whatever it is on you. They come up to you and they're going to be doing less damage than they might otherwise because you optimized your defense um, to deal with that. Um, so it's nice to have when you can have it. It also means that for like a melee fighter or something, really for anyone, you'll want to be thinking about this if you've noticed that like, hey, these creatures we're fighting seem to be really resistant to bullets. Like they're just not having that penetration. You might need to think, okay, we should add armor piercing rounds, or maybe we can try a different approach. Like maybe there's this big turtle we're fighting, and bullets aren't working so well, but maybe if we hit it with something really big, we can crack the shell. Um, Again, that's represented through damage reduction for different types of damage. So, like, say if this creature doesn't have the greatest bludgeoning resistance, then you might literally walk up to it with a huge hammer or something like that, or even a battering ram if it's slow enough, and just hit it really hard. Um, so it does encourage players to think about what they're dealing with and figure out how to adapt to the situation in order to overcome the challenges um, ahead of them. Out of combat, it is kind of a lot of what you'd expect for strength-based things, where strength can be quite useful in exploration. It's good for climbing. It's good for making big jumps. It's good for helping pull your allies up those cliffs that you're climbing. Um, good for holding up gates or pushing boulders out of the way. All the things you generally expect um, to be able to do.
I wanted to say when you mentioned earlier with you're giving me ideas for my own system. You think I never borrowed ideas that Eternal GM or Technomancer mentioned on this stream? The whole reactive shield laser talent was inspired by the reaction system, and when Eternal GM first talked about it, I added way more reaction-based buffs and the way to get more reaction points and so on.
Right.
So feel free to borrow ideas. Like I do it all
Sure.
the time. To be honest, I didn't really ask, but you can't copyright game mechanics, so.
That's true.
I implore you to
Honestly,
take everything, just not my entire game. Take anything else.
Yeah.
I honestly do think
Like
the
even
fact
stat requirements for weapons, I think is a big one that games should add in. Like I don't care if you have a strength build, there are weapons that are big enough that you need levels beyond starting level strength. As well as there's
makes
something
sense.
that Goliath should be able to wield. Like a Goliath can probably wield one-handed, a two-handed weapon of not too much high up the scale of weight. But there's still that crossover where now they're a larger build character. They are also strength, so they can wield bigger weapons easier. I accomplish that with a stat mechanic for limiting what you can use, which does have a primary and secondary stat.
That's certainly a good way of handling things.
I mean, I know where you're getting at, but again, I prefer the whole every weapon is equally good, and if you have like stat limitations, you kind of have to make them better. But then, in a way, if your character has those stats, this stat limitation really isn't really something, not a real drawback, because you're probably going to invest in those stats anyway. So, I mean, it works for
It's
your
not meant to
system.
be a drawback. Oh, go ahead.
It may work for your system, especially since you are aiming for realism. And then it does definitely make a lot of sense. But I'm not going to be touching that one.
Fair enough. Yeah, it does come a lot from the realism of things, but it's like a beginning archer, even training for a longbow, has a training version that has less resistance so that they can train up to being able to have that strength to pull it. So it doesn't matter if you can pull the longbow, can you pull it reliably for hours upon hours because you're in a battle? You're going to be fighting for several hours. So in our game, we use that stat requirement not only as a, hey, we don't want you having these better weapons till later on because they're actually bigger or harder to wield, but we also have material upgrades that actually improves their durability, their damage rates, base damage, and their stat requirements. So we kind of went a little video gamey with that side, but I've had too many players in my history go, all right, I finally got the equipment that I've been wanting. Sucks, there's nothing else I can save up for besides a magical item now. I wanted to provide those options so that you can be like, all right, so first stage, I'm going to work on getting this, but then I'm going to be able to go for this one, and that will fit with my build at this point, and then I can go for a material upgrade here. It felt like giving more options to the player in that way made it a little more fun to constantly have upgrades you could do. But and again, like you said, that's the way my system is meant to be designed.
That
It's
makes
not
a
the way every
that makes a lot of sense. I solved that problem in my system with the upgrade system, so you can keep the same weapon and upgrade it. Which also something I wanted to do because sometimes you have that character who has a weapon that's very important to him, and then he finds the +1 magic sword, and he okay, sorry. I mean, my father gave it to me, who got it from his father, who fought in the Great Elven War, but the sword is better, so goodbye.
Yeah. It is a really unfortunate thing to see where there's a conflict between um, like game mechanics, like viability in game, and role playing, lore, character background, character identity. It's a very unfortunate thing to see. Um,
But
if we're
again,
talking about
no, if you're
if we're
talking,
talking about upgrades and things like that, I have two ways of doing things in Redshifted. First of all, there are weapon attachments. You see these more on ranged weapons than on melee weapons, but there are a few things you can add to melee weapons, like improved grip, so it's harder to be disarmed of your weapon, um, and things of that nature. Um, and you can also there are also certain techniques that you can use, so you can literally take your weapon to a professional, or if you are professional, just do it yourself. Where you can apply like various like coatings or other like material changes to your weapon, which will make it work better. Um, so, for example, uh, take um, you can take your steel sword and you can carburize it and harden harden the edge of the blade there and just make it more dangerous in that way. Um, and the other thing you can do is you can take talents for your character that make them just better at using that specific weapon. And there's a big
hmm,
progression with that. So you can take this very, very far. It does mean that you're investing in that character option at the expense of your other options, because I mean, when you're taking talents, and this is the same, I'm sure, with World Shapers. Everything comes at the opportunity cost of anything else you can take. So it's just deciding what's more important to you. If you decide that you really want to be good at this specific type of weapon, you can take that progression through something like 6 or 7 talents in a row, which is just nutty, and get very, very good at using this weapon. And the other thing I've added there is that one of these talents, and this is something I'm working on for every single weapon is going to have a weapon mastery talent. So once you've taken that weapon progression far enough, you can take that talent and it will give you a special thing you can do with that weapon that gives you an additional option in combat. Um, it's something beyond just a straight stat boost. It lets you do something you couldn't do before. Um, so we think of a good example here. Um, so there's an axe that I have. It's called the Phase Axe, and um, it's an axe with a plasma blade, and so you can turn it on or off. It does a lot of damage, but it uses power over time. Um, so one thing you can do with that, with its weapon mastery talent, is you can do like a combo strike to catch your enemy off guard, where you start with the axe blade off, so it just looks like a quarterstaff. Then you basically, so what you do with this combo is you just make an unpowered attack with it, and then you combo into turning the axe blade on as you swing it up, and it catches the enemy off guard. So let
Hmm.
you combo in there by taking advantage of the unique thing about that weapon, the fact that you can turn the blade on or off. Um, it's just one example, but I plan to do it for every single weapon in the game, which is going to be a lot. But I
Nice.
think it's a fun way of adding to martial characters and
And
for
giving the
melee
weapons
weapons.
an identity, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
also have assistance. Every weapon has a greater talent that's unique to them. But one type of strength-based character we haven't really talked about is tanks. How do we have tanks in our system? What do they do to get the attention of the enemy? What can they do to reduce incoming damage? Uh,
Mhm.
Ian, do you want to start?
Sure. Um, so in Redshifted, probably your best tank class is going to be the Shock Trooper, and this is just because they can wield some of the heaviest weapons and armor and things like that in the game. They basically start um, with training in just about every single category. So you can from the get, well, not quite from the get go because you only have so much money at the start, but not too far after you start, you can get some very very heavy armor, um, and um, just have tremendous not just AC but also damage reduction, kind of like I was mentioning earlier. The heavier your armor is, the better its damage reduction tends to be. Different armor, does tend to be better at like different categories, but some of the heaviest armor is great almost across the board. Um, so like there's a nano plate, which is the most expensive armor in the game. Um, it has very solid. It has pretty solid reduction against just about everything, but I think electricity and radiation damage. Um, and so you can just walk up in this and just sort of shrug things off. You can also grab a ballistic shield. Um, and I shamelessly stole this design from the Call of Duty games. I think Black Ops 2 was the first one to do this, where you can take a ballistic shield and plant it. Um,
Hmm.
so this thing actually has spikes in the ground, like pneumatic spikes, so you can just slam your shield into the ground and activate this, and it will shoot spikes into the ground and root the shield there until you hit a switch to remove it. And this is cool because you can use it to lay down cover for not just yourself but your allies. And that's a fantastic, and that is not just specific to the shock trooper, but it's certainly a viable thing you could do with that character class. For tanking is like, don't just be tough yourself, help your allies out too. By Because enemies can come around all these angles and flank, and you're just one guy. Um, so helping set up cover for your allies, if you have the ability to do it, can be very beneficial to them. The other thing that the shock trooper can do, which pretty early on at second character level, you get the ability to body block. And what this means is that you can use a reaction to just dash in a short distance and try and intercept a hit for your ally. So let's say the enemy, you're like, oh crap, that enemy has literally a rifle, trained on my support, on my medic, and then you can just run in there and intercept the shot. And then they are forced to make their attack against you instead of against against your ally, and you are then relying on your armor to absorb the damage, or keep, or to not die from that. Um, but I think that mobility is very important to have, and in these tactical games, certainly, when you have enemies that can come in all over the place, you can't be everywhere at once, and so the ability to reposition yourself, I think, is pretty important and honestly very underrated. I don't see a lot of systems that allow that kind of thing to happen. Um, and it's a cool moment. It lets you be that tank. It lets you really capitalize on, like, hey, I'm tough. Let me put that to good use. Let me help out my team. Let me have my moment and be special, because that's the entire tank identity, is absorbing that hit so your ally doesn't.
Eternal GM, what kind of tank mechanics does your game have?
Really, a lot of it has come down to where, like I said, we split power and strength. So Our warrior is pretty much primary strength, secondary power. Its focus is on durability damage, concussive damage, and outright breaking you down. So when you're dealing with a tank, our armor system's a little different. It doesn't add to your AC. You have a dodge rating and an armor rating. So they either hit above or below your armor and your dodge rating. That's if they hit you or not. So your armor rating only comes in a contest if you are hit, and that's directly absorption of damage. And if you take a crit, you are taking durability damage. So the one weakness of a tank is if that armor breaks, they have two options: fight with all the negatives and none of the positives of having that armor on, or find a way to take it off, because now it's a hindrance. I have little bitty things like from light, medium, and heavy armor, an increasing amount of negatives to you wearing said armor, to different stat checks and things like that. But your dodge rating actually lowers. I didn't like how no matter what, you just put on the biggest armor you can because you're harder to hit. But I don't know if you've ever worn plate mail, but I bet you can dodge better without it on than with it. So that's why our tank is actually about foregoing dodging entirely. It's like a decision in a way you can't have in our game because of the armor system. They intentionally are soaking. We have an ability for marshals called Brace for Impact. Do not, as a non-warrior, get and brace for impact with a warrior. They are about to grab you and ruin your day. So that's our point of it. They will take the attack and soak it, swallow it in, and hurt you for it. They are willing to take the hit because they know you're weakest at contact with us. So that's their whole game. Our tanks break you for hitting them.
But yeah, I guess that does disincentivize to attack the tank, right? Which, oh,
Kind of
It
raises
does,
a
but you
point.
really don't want to turn your back to the tank. See, it does create that problem. It's like, no, I don't want to hit you. I'm going over. Fuck. Yoink. Like, you don't want that. Damn it. Like, that's what I mean. That's how our tank plays. It's like, get back over here. No, you're not running away. Like, what are you talking about?
That's like,
They're
okay.
not exactly incapable. That's why I love my reaction and trigger system. It's like, oh, you're going to move. It's not my turn. I'm going to shift my battle position because I can use one of my reactions off my turn to move half my movement speed, which means I'm about to be right in front of you smiling and saying, bring it. So it can do that same stuff. It's going to be in your face. If you run around it, this is probably a bad idea, because you probably got the dexterity fighter right behind that guy going, come around that big fat dude's corner. Come on. Come around that shield. So that's
Nice.
how our tanks go. So yes, you're right. You are incentivized to not hit the big bad tank, but the tank is incentivized to grab you.
That's definitely a funny and effective way to handle that. For Ishanekon Word Shapers, actually, I kind of have elements of what both you said. In my system, there are 4 types of armor: clothed, light, medium, and heavy. And the heavier the armor, the higher your armor value, which is just reduces incoming damage. But the lower your evasion cap, so your base evasion cannot be as high. It doesn't matter if you're super nimble and have an evasion of 18. If you're wearing a heavy armor that doesn't have any upgrades, your evasion is 13. That's it. While wearing clothes, it can be an evasion of 16. And but you can actually have the dodge tank in my system. Just forgo the heavy armor or balance. Medium armor is very good to achieve that balance, but also with heavy armor, if you stack the lighter armor upgrades and combine it with a shield, which increases your evasion, you can actually make a character with high evasion and high armor. But you really have to focus on that defense. Then for the whole moving in between an attack, there's a sub archetype, the protector, that gets exactly that ability to say, nope, you're targeting me, not my ally. So I like how great minds think alike. Okay, great minds. I say great minds to discredit myself, not to discredit you.
You reminded me of
I just like whatever. I just going to move on. I didn't want to offend anybody. I just that maybe came out of it. Anyway,
Great job.
but it reminded me
Charisma.
of a interesting point.
What?
We legitimately have added something with shield since the last time we've talked about like combat, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to present since we're talking about strength builds. It's kind of halfway there and halfway not, because shields in our system either work as extra soaking of damage, but if it's a smaller shield, this is also where your parry comes in. If my opponent rolls to hit me and they hit right on my dodge rating, but below and all the way to below my armor rating, that is in my blocking or parrying range. Below that range, below the dodge rating, is my counterattack threshold for martials. So now we've actually added in the shield utility of I can parry or have extra soak. So you take less damage, or you actually have a chance for a counter, or make this person step to another part of the hex we're in.
Yeah, my system actually has 3 types of shield: light, medium, and heavy. And the main way they differentiate themselves, they effectively all give you +2 to evasion, but the way they do that is different. The light shield increases the evasion cap of your armor and gives you +1 to evasion. So it's very good if you have a high evasion build, but your armor is kind of limiting you to getting everything out of your evasion. Then light shield is a very good option. It also has the lowest weight. But then on the other hand, you have the medium shield, who is twice as heavy. It just gives you a flat +2 to evasion. And then you have the heavy shield, which reduces your evasion cap by 1, but gives you +3 to evasion. So the heavy shield is excellent for high strength characters who can take that extra weight, which the heavy shield is a weight of 6, just as the heavy armor. So you really need a high strength for your inventory not to be immediately full. And if your base evasion isn't that high anyway, you don't care that your evasion cap is reduced. Plus, when it comes to damage reduction, you can upgrade shields to increase your armor, so you can have the shield to support your armor build. Oh, kitty cat.
He wanted to join the show for a second.
Yeah, little Dex warrior. But yeah, let me hurry up since we don't have that much time. You have the protector, which is more of a classical tanks intervening. One universal tank mechanic is the taunt status effect, which you can give enemies, which gives them disadvantage if they attack anybody other than yourself. But and there are different ways to give it. You can use the taunt ability, the taunting attack ability, the taunting wrath ability, or the protector actually gets the ability to automatically taunt an enemy they hit with attack. But there are also other types of tanks. The Guardian, for example, if the enemy keeps attacking your allies, you get an aura which increases the defensive values of all your allies within that aura, which keeps on stacking the more they attack your allies. So that disincentivizes to keep attacking your allies. There are also the Vindicator, who gets stronger the more their allies get attacked, which can stack incredibly fast. So you really don't want to hit his friends, otherwise that's going to hurt a lot. Then there are more passive kind of tanks. For example, the Paragon, which can have an aura which buffs your allies, which can be a defensive buff, so you just boost the defense of your allies. The Barrier Master is also a character who is, I guess, more of a caster tank, since he uses reactions to sharply increase the armor of the allies, or can just put barriers in the field which boost the armor of allies and so on. So you can actually have, I guess that's not a strength-based tank anymore, but it is technically still a tank. But yeah, we are running out of time. Any final comments that any one of you wants to say?
I'm just
I'm
really
good.
happy to be on the show, honestly.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you
was
for having me.
it was great having you here, Ian. Feel free to join us next week or whenever. We basically have no more than 4 people, but as long as there's a slot, feel free to join us. Happy to have you here, and thank you for everybody who joined the stream, watching now or maybe watching in the future. And I hope to see you next week, everybody. See you then. Bye.
Later.